Hi everyone, so if you're new here, I'm Damaris and I created Rainbow Vegans Rock, and on my channel I talk about vegan things and eco-friendly things. So today's video is vegan documentaries that I think everyone should watch. Stay tuned for the end of the video, I've got a shout out. So first of all, I just wanted to say that I won't be showing any of the clips from any of these documentaries, mostly because it can be a bit distressing, and also I don't actually know where I stand legally with doing that anyway, so rather than risking it, I won't be showing clips. All I'll show is the front cover of the documentaries that I'm recommending. Although I think, like I said, everyone should watch these. Also, that is down to you as an individual, whether you're going to actually choose to watch any of these documentaries, so that has to be your decision, if that makes sense. So I understand that not everyone watching this video will be vegan either, so I'm not coming at this from a view of judgment because I understand that everyone's different, everyone's got different lives, and most people that are vegan now obviously weren't always vegan, so I do appreciate that. So if you're expecting judgment or anything like that, you won't get that from me. So story time. First of all, just a bit of background of how I came to be vegan myself. So I was working in an office around 5 years ago and I overheard a conversation between a few of my colleagues, and they were talking about animal agriculture being the leading cause of global warming. At this time I was a not very strict vegetarian, but this was the first I'd heard of that, so to me that was quite shocking. I considered myself an environmentalist, but I wasn't actually aware of this and still consumed dairy really regularly. I was obsessed with cheese. So during this conversation, it was recommended one of my colleagues to watch a series of documentaries which was more on the veganism side of things. And because of this, I decided to watch the documentaries myself. I was curious. So the one that they were talking about initially was actually Cowspiracy. So that was the one that the only other vegan in the office was recommending my other colleague to watch. So yeah, they were discussing Cowspiracy because that was eye-opening to her when she watched it, and then the vegan colleague basically recommended she watch Over Knives and Earthlings as well. So to start with myself, like I said, because I was interested in this, I decided to seek out Cowspiracy, which is just on Netflix, so nice and easy. And it was Kip Anderson's first film of this type, I believe. So the style of the video is obviously outlining a conspiracy between the environmental charities and the fact that they don't seem to want to mention one of the main causes of global warming, which is animal agriculture. So the documentary as a whole is really interesting and well worth a watch for everybody. There's only a few scenes which are depicting animal cruelty, so only a tiny bit compared to other documentaries that I've seen anyway, but it's mostly just talking about the environmental impact and everything to do with that, basically. After I watched this myself, I decided almost immediately that I was going vegan. I did continue to watch the other documentaries, but that was the main moment when I thought, okay, I need to go vegan. And then the other documentaries I watched just sort of solidified it for me. So next I watched the Fork Over Knives, which I mentioned. So this is very fact-based documentary, just talking about the impact of meat and dairy on our bodies. So the bit that stuck out to me was where they discussed cases of cancer in a country in Europe. I can't remember if it was Norway or Sweden. I meant to check this before I started filming, but the baby's teething and being a nightmare, and I just completely forgot to check this bit of information. But it's one of the Europe countries anyway, where they looked at the cases of cancer reported during the war and after the war. So during the war, when meat and dairy was scarce, the cases of cancer in that country dropped right the way down. So then after the war, they noticed that the cases of cancer gradually started to creep back up again. So as soon as meat and dairy was becoming more readily available again, these cases of cancer were returning, basically. So this is a very interesting documentary. If you're interested in health and keeping yourself healthy, well worth a watch, this one. So lastly, on my journey of going vegan, I watched Earthlings, which is narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, which is the actor, in case you don't know, who's also an animal activist. So this one is definitely not for the faint-hearted. It was a very important film for me to watch because at that time I sort of ticked them off in my head. I'd watched Cowspiracy and I thought, okay, so eating animal products is not good for the planet. And then, oh, okay, so eating animal products isn't good for our health either. And then finally, for me, was watching the actual cruelty of what happens to animals. So even though it was really distressing, it was a very important documentary for me. I'm not an apathetic person either. I couldn't watch something like that and then just continue with my life, forgetting that it happened. So I decided then and there that I was going to go plant-based. I thought that eating eggs and things like that, I hadn't really considered cutting those out, but I think I decided, right, okay, no more dairy, and I wasn't eating meat anyway, so it was just a bit stricter. But the eggs and honey and the extra bits, that just came with time. Within a few weeks I decided that I didn't want to buy eggs either because that's still a very cruel industry, so I continued, as it were. So that's my story time. Hopefully that's not too long and boring. But so the next one that I would recommend would be Dominion. So this is an Australian film from the makers of Earthlings as well, and there's bits of this film which are also narrated by Joaquin Phoenix and Kat Von D and a couple of other people. But this is it shows detailed cruelty from the meat and dairy industry. So it goes animal by animal and tells you exactly what is happening to all of these animals with footage, and the narrations are not emotional. There's only the last little bit at the end of the film which has more emotion in the narration. All the way through it is literally just telling you exactly what happens to the animals. But I can tell you now that this was equally as bad as watching Earthlings to me, but also again another really important lesson. And even though I've been vegan 5 years, I actually do think, for some people, not for everyone obviously, but I do think it's important to me to occasionally watch these documentaries out of my own curiosity, and also so that if it's a good one I can recommend it to other people, and also just a reminder as to why I'm doing it. I don't necessarily need a massive reminder, but watching that film, when it's been so long since I've watched Earthlings, it brought it all back, just how truly horrendous the meat and dairy industry is. So, and don't think that because this is an Australian film that this isn't happening in whichever country you're watching from, because I believe this kind of cruelty is happening everywhere. So the next one is What the Health. And this is another primarily health style documentary, which has got Kip Anderson, again, so the same person that was the creator of Cowspiracy and eventually went on to do Seaspiracy. But this just breaks down the average American diet and all of the health issues that come along with that. So just basically as a summary, it outlines the fact that going on a plant-based diet can reduce your risk of heart disease, cancers, diabetes. There is people that he talks to through this that have started before they were on a plant-based diet, were on endless medication and thought to be for the rest of their life, and then they go on a plant-based diet and in a few months they can come off this medication. So it really is amazing, and you can think, if you're doubtful about this, then by all means go and watch it, do your own research. But I've heard this said so many times by doctors, scientists, experts, that a plant-based diet does reduce your risk of all of these things, that there's no doubt in my mind that that's true. I know how I feel on a vegan diet as well, and even sleep deprivation with a baby is not that bad now. I can still function, I don't get ill all the time like I was when I was vegetarian, and not eating particularly healthy either back then. So another thing that really stuck in my mind about What the Health documentary specifically was the common misconception that people think that everything in moderation is healthy. So what they're saying in this was that when it comes to meat and dairy, you can't just have small amounts because of how bad it is for our health. So that really stuck in my mind because it's a phrase that people use a lot isn't it? If you think about it, depending on where you are in the world, I guess, but certainly in the UK, it's something that people say a lot. And there's a lot of confusion with things being declared as being unhealthy, like bacon, processed foods. We know that's unhealthy, but the media will 1 week declare that it's unhealthy and another week declare that it's good for your health. So this just causes confusion in people as well. So the next one I wanted to recommend was Dairy is Scary. So this is just a YouTube video. I think it's only about 5 minutes long I can't remember the name of the YouTuber, but if you search for Dairy is Scary in YouTube, then you will find this video. But she just explains it so very well and in a short space of time. There is of course lots of other activism content on YouTube as well. Earthling Ed is one that comes to mind, but there's many more. So if you're interested in learning more about this, do have a look, and especially if you're more of a YouTube person as well. So Food Inc. This is another documentary, an American one from 2008. So this one is a little bit older. I've definitely seen this one, but it was a while ago and when I was first vegan. But it was just another great documentary just outlining the environmental impact of corporate farming and the abuse that happens to the humans and animals in the industry. So well worth a watch. Seaspiracy. So interestingly, Seaspiracy was trending on Netflix recently over the last month or so. So this is, to me, this is really interesting because that means that more people have watched this recently. Certainly in the UK, I've seen a lot of discussions rather on Facebook between friends and family members about this documentary. And for a lot of them, it was things that they weren't aware of until now. Because I've watched all of these vegan documentaries, the environmental impact of fishing in quite a few of these documentaries that I've watched is mentioned. They talk about how there will be empty oceans by 2048 if we continue overfishing the way we do. And so this wasn't huge news to me. I've seen memes and things like that in my sort of vegan and environmental circles. But there is some of it that I think some people just literally aren't aware of. So it's well worth a watch, this one. So this documentary also repeats the plastic pollution in the ocean as well. I watched A Plastic Ocean on Netflix last year. So this wasn't new to me, but it was interesting that they mentioned straws, and straws is like 0.03 of the plastic that's in the ocean. And I remember when people were all going crazy about plastic straws back over the last few years, really. So yes, definitely worth watching this one if you haven't watched it already. Another one is Game Changers. So I was recommended this one actually, I think a couple of years ago by a colleague at work, and I'd been meaning to watch it, but I watched it the weekend. I managed to find it on YouTube, I think it was. I'll leave links for all of these documentaries if I remember to do that. I'll leave links in the description box. Some were Vimeo videos, some were YouTube, some were Netflix, so I'll leave links. So this documentary is presented by James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, why can't I say his name? I tried. Lewis Hamilton, and it's quite a different documentary to the rest of them because it's a health documentary, but it shows the top athletes and even one of the strongest men in the entire world who are living on a plant-based diet and not struggling, quite literally thriving on it. So it's just, I think this is an amazing one to watch because it's debunking the myth that you can't be a man's man on the plant-based diet, or you can't be strong or an amazing athlete, because that's what all of these athletes are doing successfully. So I thought this is a very interesting one. It also debunks the myth that soya products contain estrogen, which is definitely another common misconception. Apparently you're more likely to get extra estrogen from meat and dairy products than you are from soy products. So that was interesting. And they also compare the distraction from the meat and dairy industry to how the tobacco industry years ago, they would spread confusion and flat out deny that tobacco caused cancer, even though, as we now know, it 100% causes cancer. So if you haven't watched this one, do watch it, it's really cool. Lastly, Live and Let Live. I couldn't actually find this one to watch myself. It's available on Vimeo, but you have to pay for it, and I am not in a position to pay for it right now. But the basic outline that I could find on this one is it shows 6 individuals who decide to stop eating animal products and go on a plant-based diet for various reasons and what they find out from this experiment. So if you're in another country and you can easily watch this one, do look out for it because it does sound quite interesting. So lastly, like I said, I just wanted to do a shout out this week. So this week my shout out is to Kirsten. She's known as No Blood No Tears on Instagram, and I just wanted to say I appreciate all your comments and support on Instagram and on my channel. So I hope that's been useful today. Hit the like button if it has, because it does really help me out, and I best go and see if my baby's okay. So I will see you on the next video.